apologize. Welcome to Caribbean Thought Lecture 7. We're waiting on the other students to arrive, but what we want to get into for this class today is we want to continue where we left off at the last class, which is we want to explore the islands of the Caribbean. Briefly, just compare them. Martinique, Belize, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Haiti, quickly. We won't get into their scenarios and their struggles. We will pick up from that later on, but we just want to quickly do a brief overview of the islands of the Caribbean. We won't look at all of them, but majority of them. And then when we're finished with that, and by the way, there was a quiz that you guys did last week in terms of what defines or set Cuba and Haiti apart from the other Caribbean, from Trinidad, Barbados, Guyana, and Jamaica. And you guys came up with an answer, which majority of the class came up with the right answer, which was answer B. I want to take a deeper look, a deeper dive delving into the dynamics of that particular quiz, highlighting the disparities or the similarities of the islands. Yes, that's what I want to say. Quite poetic. And then we want to finish that, and then we want to get into Garveyism, Black nationalism, but we won't have time because next week is a break, midterm break. So what we will do next week, we won't have a class. So my intention was to have you guys watch the Bob Marley movie, but we won't have time to watch, and also to watch Life and Death and Who Shot the Sheriff. There's a lot of film to watch. But today the lecture is supposed to be, we're supposed to segue into the topic for today, which is looking at Garveyism. Especially there is Christian nationalism is trending on Twitter right now, and I responded to I made a tweet about it earlier, looking at the difference between Garveyism or Garvey's nationalism with Padmore's nationalism, or Malcolm X brand of freedom and rights and activism, Malcolm X, as against Martin Luther King. But they were talking about Christian nationalism earlier today, talking about Christian nationalism is a nationalism that speaks to an ideology, highlighting the fact that freedoms are derived from nothing that is external to the man, but from within himself, in a sense. So we're actually not freedom. The freedom and the rights that people have is accorded to us because it coming from God. And I talk about the fact in the book Neoliberalism, Globalization, Economic Equality. I talk about post-independent countries. When we got independent, it was a putative. We talk about granted freedoms and independence, and countries that took their independence are suffering, as against countries that were granted independence have a certain amount of freedom, but it is still one that is managed and mitigated by a neoliberal kind of globalization. By the way, if you want to look at Garveyism and Black nationalism, of course, one of the questions we ask: how effective is the civil rights movement? How effective is the global justice movement? How effective is Garveyism? How effective is this national movement towards freedom and independence and prosperity? What is nationalism? Of course, we want to define nationalism today. We want to look at Eli Kaduri's book, Nationalism, briefly looking at nationalism and highlighting the self-determinism or self-determination, which is an important concept or component of nationalism. And of course, when you start talking about Black nationalism, you start thinking about liberation theology, or Black liberation theology. And as theologians, you want to ask yourself, is there a clash? Is there a conflict between a kind of nationalism, a kind of kind of pursuit towards independence and freedom, which means then you will have to challenge the status quo or certain conservative or traditional values. And then, of course, you will argue that, well, that's why that's what has created some of the slow progress and change in parts of the Caribbean, because, of course, the study that I'm asking you to do, the attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs, attitudes towards Rastafarianism. Rastafarianism started in the 1930s. This movement towards response to the unrest and the economic plight and the poverty, rising inequality in the 1930s and the unrest in the 1930s, leading to this populist drive towards nationalism and independence, so on and so forth. But Rastafarianism and some of the Afro-Caribbean belief is a response to colonialism and domination. But this domination and colonialism, this kind of thrust, it's against Eurocentric ideas, which is embedded in Caribbean freedoms and inherited countries, part of our dogmas and our rules today. And we ourselves look down upon these very same things. But anyway, we want to talk about Garveyism and black nationalism. But of course, we want to define nationalism as nationalism. When nationalism, you have to think about independence. But we want to talk about Garveyism, black nationalism, and neoliberal globalization. But as again, I said, neoliberal globalization didn't start until about the 1960s, more so the 70s and the 80s. Moving into the 90s and the 2000s, especially in the 1990s, the rise of the big corporation, the rise of the corporation, the multinationals and the transnational, and multinationalism and transnationalism is part of what neoliberal globalization promoted. The ability of companies in post-industrial countries to do business all over the world and to build large conglomerates and corporations extending all over the world and penetrating and dominating markets, creating monopolies. Dominating markets, penetrating markets, and part of neoliberal globalization was to create rules led to the creation of association and organizations that promoted free trade, and where countries have to now liberalize and break down barriers to free trade and globalization, which in effect, smaller countries, but once you break down barriers, penetration is easy and it's difficult for you to compete. But we won't, as I said to you, we may not be able to get into neoliberal globalization today, because by the time we get into exploring the islands of the Caribbean, and by the time we get into Garveyism and black nationalism, we may not have time to delve into neoliberal globalization, which we'll have to wait until week after next or something of the sort. But coupled with looking at neoliberal globalization, what globalization is and how it has affected the global South and the Caribbean, involves, yes, looking at a film, Life and Death, which we will consider. The first film we want to consider is Life and Death. I really want us to watch Life and Death, because it will open your eyes to a lot of things. It will really set the stage and now start really mushrooming some of the ideas that we've been talking about in a very powerful and powerful way. I find film quite powerful. I find that whenever I teach this class, the first weeks, it takes a while for the students to start grappling with some of the tense concepts of the course and the complexity of it. But as we constantly bombard you with the same concepts over through the progress and the journeys that we go through, and then I start showing the movie like Life and Death, Who Shot the Sheriff, and then having discussions about it and so on. Then that's when you really the concepts will start to hit home to you guys. So I'm looking forward to have you guys watching that film and have an opportunity to discuss it with you, because I think it will be really profound, as it was for me when I watched it the first time here in the US under the tutelage of Rita Bernard, who wrote Nelson Mandela's memoir, who was the editor, and Rita Bernard, the English professor at the University of Penn, who was teaching cinema and globalization, and I had an opportunity to watch Life and Death, which really opened up my eyes about a lot of things. But we'll get an opportunity to watch that next in terms of the film that we will watch as we move into neoliberal, discussing neoliberal globalization. But we will begin, as we begin, we would, I usually like to, that's the preface. I like to always preface class by doing that. But so it's now, I don't know what time it is. What time is it? It is now, let me see. It's 3:27. I will begin the lecture in about 3 or 5 minutes officially, beginning by looking at looking at this concept of nationalism. Well, I'm not sure yet whether we're going to look at nationalism or I'm going to continue with what we were doing last week. Actually, we'll continue what we were doing last week, and then we'll move into the concept of nationalism and quickly touch on this idea of Christian nationalism as against nationalism, and then look at Eli Kadori's book, Nationalism, how he defines nationalism, and we'll delve into that quickly. All right, so we will start momentarily. All right, we'll begin. We will begin the lecture. We said we want to pick up from where we left off last week, but some earlier today there was something trending on Twitter. I don't know if you guys get a chance. Let me see if I could bring it up quickly, which I found it quite interesting. Let me bring this, which I want to share with you guys. Let me see if I could find it. Christian nationalist. Christian nationalist was trending on Twitter today, and I wanted to actually share a quick bite.
Joins us now live. McKenzie, you sat down with the executive director of the Rainbow Youth Project. What can you tell us?
Yeah, well, typically the Rainbow Youth Project reports handling about 87 calls from Oklahoma per week, but within just...
All right, actually, I'm trying to find... all right, here we go. But anyways, there is... Christian nationalist is trending on social media. It says, you're a Christian nationalist if I guess. You're a Christian nationalist if I guess I've been a Christian nationalist from way back, even though I've not embraced that label. Who's a Christian nationalist? I'm not sure who a Christian nationalist is. But according to what's trending on social media, I'm going to bring it up here shortly for you guys. You're a Christian nationalist if I guess I've been a Christian nationalist from way back, even though I've not embraced that label. Several times a year, I remind our congregation that all of our rights and freedoms are gifts of God. Here is the crux of the matter. I'm reading a tweet from Howell Scott. Howell Scott is a Christian conservative pastor, former lawyer, Florida native, but he's talking about Christian nationalists. He said that even though I've not embraced that label, 7 times a year I remind our congregation that all of our rights and freedoms are gifts of God. Gifts of God. all our rights and freedoms are gifts of God. And you know, I've oftentimes talked about the issue of, and it's quite interesting that I'm about to pick up from where we left off last week, and I asked the question, what differentiates or what separates Haiti and Cuba from other Caribbean islands on the issue of, but it is on the issue of their nationalism and how they realized or achieved or got their nationalism or their independence. So you know, I talk about it. I've oftentimes said to my students in this class, you can learn. Learning doesn't happen in a vacuum. Learning it doesn't happen. Learning does not happen in a vacuum. I've oftentimes said that, and that is very important in terms of how learning is done today. You have to look at, you have to relate it back to society. What's happening today? And I oftentimes say to students, break what's going on in society so that you can relate back to your class, which is important. So I was actually looking at what's going on in the world, and I saw that this issue of Christian nationalism was trending. And this Christian pastor wrote that he had been a Christian nationalist from way back, even though I've not embraced that label. The importance of label is important. He said, even though I have not embraced that label, because once you label me, you negate me. The issue of label is important. Embracing a concept is good, but in one end, it's bad. As I said, culture is good in one sense, but culture is also bad in another sense. Nationalism is good in one sense, but it's also bad it's bad in another sense. And of course, you can understand why we are saying that. Okay, so although he's saying that I embrace Christian nationalism from way back, I don't embrace that label. I don't want to be considered a Christian nationalist outside of anything else, because you get who you are and your ideals get lost, because sometimes you might be a little bit different from a Christian nationalist. But anyways, but he says several times a year, I remind our congregation that all of our rights and freedoms are gifts of God. That's what a Christian nationalist. Christian nationalists believe that people's rights and freedoms are gifts of God, not grants of the government, state or federal. So I guess I could be branded a Christian nationalist, because I've oftentimes, and even in the book Neoliberalism, and in the new book coming out, and what I have promoted and what I teach, and as post-colonialists, maybe we are Christian nationalists. But I've oftentimes said that, and I've oftentimes challenged the independence of many post-independent countries, because the kind of independence and freedoms, say for example, when we think about the civil rights, when we think about the emancipation and the freedom, the emancipation was an act. Okay, it's an act. Emancipation is an act. And independence is, they have elaborate ceremonies granting freedoms and so on and so forth. But I've oftentimes said, okay, some people, but then you have to be careful about this, the narrative, when people say that all of our rights and freedoms are gifts of God, not grants. Who are they talking about? Black people, brown people, or Anglo-Saxon people? Whenever black and brown people fight for their freedom and independence, that's a problem. But when other kind of people do it, say for example, the American Revolution, okay, after the Americans got their independence was recognized, their new nation was recognized, but their nation wasn't recognized. In fact, they were ordered to pay a debt. Did America pay a debt? We don't know about that. Some people can point to what's going on in the world today. Russia fighting Ukraine, or invading Ukraine, as against the Palestinians, and the fight between Israel and Hamas, and so on and so forth. I will let you be the judge of that. But even though, anyway, let's continue with the narrative as it relates to Christian nationalists. Even though I've not embraced that label, several times a year I remind our congregation that all our rights and freedoms are gifts of God, not grants of the government. And by that, he means state or federal. Therefore, the government, regardless of the branch or the means, can never take away those rights or freedoms. That doesn't mean that they won't try, and they have tried. We see that happening all the time. The attacks on biblical Christianity are only in their infancy here in the US. They can and will get much worse, so on and so forth. That was somebody responding to an issue. But that's quite interesting. And then of course there was, I want to play this particular this conversation that someone had.
Is that they believe.
I want to play a conversation that someone was having about Christian nationalism for you as well. So let me stop sharing my screen and go back to share again. And where is it? Is it this? Yes. And share. Okay, and let me share the sound as well. Share sound. Listen to this, guys.
The one thing that unites all of them, because there's many different groups orbiting Trump, but the thing that unites them as Christian nationalists, not Christians, by the way, because Christian nationalists is very different, is that they believe that our rights as Americans, as all human beings, don't come from any earthly authority. They don't come from Congress. They don't come from the Supreme Court. They come from God. The one thing that unites all of them, because there's many different groups orbiting Trump.
Okay, so they're talking about Trump, the US, in the US, and the people who support Trump are calling themselves Christian nationalists, believing that their authority don't come from Congress, but it comes from God. Now, as critical thinkers, that could be a dangerous statement, because when you think about nationalism, the people who support Trump, you know what happened on January 6th. Many of them tried to launch an insurrection and to overturn the election results. In their defense, they're calling themselves Christian nationalists, saying that, and their authority to do that, it doesn't come from man, or it doesn't come from it. Okay, in fact, yes, they violated Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, but Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is man's law. Okay, they defied that, because you know what trumps man's law? God's law. So they're saying that their action, the action of people in a democracy to challenge democracy through an insurrection comes from God. So, you know, I said nationalism is good in one sense, but in another sense, it can be bad. And you know what? Eli Kaduri points to that in his book, Nationalism. The idea that nationalism is based on a people who ascribe to a certain law and establish a system in place. But what if another group challenge that system with another law? It's quite interesting. What if that? And so therefore I argue the point, you know, what will upend society and our progress is our propensity to think in categories and classes. And the idea of having nationalism, the nationalism in some is good, but in another sense it's bad, because it may promote categories and classes who continue to promote certain privileges and special interests, thinking that their ideals is better than the ideas of the other group. It's quite interesting. We're going to talk about nationalism a little bit today. Okay, we're going to talk about that a little bit today. But we're going to stop here quickly, and because this is quite interesting. But the idea of nationalism speaks to the issue of rights and freedom, individual liberties, states' rights, and sovereignty. The issue of sovereignty. Nationalism nationalism, and I actually quickly wrote something for you guys today that as we start to talk about Christian nationalism. So, if Christian nationalism are people who believe and think that their freedom and their ability to act freely and their freedom comes from God, nothing is stopping anyone then from pointing to such ideal to promote insurrection. Then you have to, well, but when you study black nationalism, that is exactly what black liberation theology and black nationalists point to. They point to the divine. We're gonna get into that in a minute. But what is nationalism though? Nationalism promotes the idea of free and independent peoples, states, nations devoid of control or colonialism. Let me say that again. Nationalism promoted the idea of free and independent peoples, states, nations devoid of control or colonialism. Or we call that colonialism. Or, okay, it promotes the ideals of national rights and states' sovereignty. I usually talk, I think at one point I mentioned to you guys the Bandung Conference in 1955, I think it was held, where non-aligned countries and the book, I believe it's in the Wretched of the Earth, in the Wretched of the Earth, French Fanon, in fact, not really French Fanon, but in the preface, Homi Baba and I think it's who was it as well? It's Homi Baba and Richard Philcox talks about the Bandung Conference, and probably I should bring it up. I think I raised it at the last. I think I may have raised it at the last class. I want to see if but I talk about I think it's in 1955, they had the Bandung Conference. Again, many people don't know about the Bandung Conference. The Bandung Conference is where third world, I don't use the word third world, but let me read this particular statement here in the book, Wretched of the Earth. And I said this in the last class. It must be ironic, even absurd at first, to search for associations and intersection between colonization and globalization, when decolonization had the dream of a third world of free post-colonial nations firmly on its horizon, whereas globalization gazes at the nation through the backwaters. But that's not what I'm trying to find. I'm trying to find the page that speaks to the Bandung Conference in 1955. But I don't see it. I don't remember where I saw it. But in 1955, they had the Bandung Conference, and all the former colonized countries come together to advocate and to draft up a plan and to dream up of a plan for their independence and so on and so forth. That I think that at the same time we were transitioning from thinking about West Indian Federation to, I guess, an independent Caribbean islands. But in 1955, they were just drive towards the nation, free, independent third world, as they use it. Then we don't use that now. Nations that were non-aligned. But the issue of nationalism is quite front and center in Caribbean thought, and the fact that people are having a conversation about nationalism and Christian nationalists. But then I even went further earlier today to talk about what the Bandung Conference in 1955 was, where so former countries that were colonized, seeking independence, came together to have a conference to talk about the independence and to explore plans for the independence. At the same time, in the 1950s, you have the Algerian War for liberation and freedom. It's quite interesting when you think about nationalism. You're still the idea of freedom. The idea of freedom is important. Nationalism drives home the idea of freedom, but then freedom. Then you have to ask what type of freedom or the ways of realizing freedom. We think about violence, but what kind of violence? I'm against violence that destroys edifices, but I believe a kind of violence of strategy. But we won't get into that right now. But when you think about nationalism, nationalism promotes freedom. Um, and when you think about the words that comes to mind when you think about freedom is emancipation. Say, for example, when slavery was, the Emancipation Act of 1833 in the West Indian or the British Caribbean, where that freed all slaves. And okay, so an act of parliament freed us. But here we're talking about Christian nationalists challenges this act of parliament. So yes, fine. While we have an act of parliament that freed slaves, no act of parliament can re-enslave men, or any man for that matter. But what differentiates some men from other men in the Western hemisphere is that some men are inherently free while other men were granted freedoms, however you see it. And when you talk about our freedoms, then you have to delve in. When you say our, who are you talking about? Because some people, the word our doesn't extend to all peoples, only some peoples. But anyways, but the idea of freedom extends to the idea of emancipation and abolishment, because the abolishment of slavery never occurred. We talk about emancipation and abolishment because although slaves were freed in 1833, the Emancipation Act never got to certain parts of the Caribbean until 1865. So then again, so slaves were working the plantations as enslaved peoples, yet they were free. So the question is, were they free? Were they paid? From 1833 to 1865, when the slaves were working the plantation, they weren't aware of their freedom, but yet they were free. So all that time when they were working, once the announcement got to them that they were free and they left the plantation, were they compensated for the work that they provided on these plantations from 1833 to 1865? And I have written an article about that as well, talking about that 1833 to 1865. No, they were not paid. So then the idea of repatriation comes into play. And just so you know, when the slaves were freed, when the slaves were freed in 1865, in 1833, and eventually when they left in 1865, many plantation owners were compensated. They were insured against loss of property. So they were compensated, but the slaves weren't compensated. And when people talk about repatriation, they say, oh, it can't be done. But it can be done. But anyway, we won't talk about how it can be done. But we're saying that, yet I understand that there were some elites in Jamaica and many Caribbean islands that were paid lump sum of money. Some of them were even black people who had slaves and plantations. Some of them had plantations. Some black people had plantations with black people working on some of these places. You had some black and brown elites who were paid insurance money. Was this money shared with some of the slaves who also worked, because slaves worked the plantation anyways? But the idea of nationalism speaks to the idea of freedom. Freedom speaks to the idea of emancipation and abolishment. The idea of independence, because although slaves were freed in the West Indies and following the emancipation and then the abolishment, they were still treated as second-class citizens living in a country that was predominantly of their own race, black and brown peoples, but it was still a colony of the external. So they were still, the peoples were free, but yet they were not. The country were and the country was not free in terms of they were still under the control of the external. So then the issue of independence, or the issue of the nation, and many nations got in, and the kind of independence that you want. Because then we talk about independence Independence speak to the nation, because you talk about an independent nation, a nation with your own laws, with your own rules. When you talk about your own nation, with your own governance, with your own policies, with a governance with your own political system, your own traditions. Not that, I mean, so that's what we're talking about, where you have a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So it wasn't until 1960 that many countries were guaranteed that. And then, of course, in the Americas, we talk about, in the US, we talk about civil rights. It wasn't until the 1960s as well that American black people got civil rights. So although American, following the although many American slaves were freed, they never got civil rights until the 1960s. So then when you talk about nationalism, you also talk about the issue of civil rights. When you talk, by the way, we talk about comparing nationalism. There are some prominent figures that you have to think about. Today, I think it's Martin. We are celebrating Martin Luther King Day or something like that. And people always compare Malcolm X with Martin Luther King. And in a sense, Marcus Garvey influenced Martin Luther King, but he didn't really influence Malcolm X in a sense, but in a sense he did. But more so, I think it was George Padmore that influenced Malcolm X. Because when you start to look at nationalism, because you have different kind of nationalism. Say, for example, you might say, I will say to you, and if you read the book Neoliberalism, which is our textbook, the second part of the book looks at the limitations of Garveyism and black nationalism. I think that's chapter 9. But I draw a comparison between Marcus Garvey's nationalism and Padmore's Garveyism. Martin Luther as against Malcolm X. Marcus Garvey's nationalism still promotes, in a sense, and still promoted a kind of white imperialism, a white imperialist form of the nation, of this black nationalism. They still promoted a white imperialism that promoted a kind of black supremacy, but actually I should not say black supremacy, because they never promoted a kind of black supremacy in a sense over and against other, because then, but in a sense they did promote a kind of black supremacy, more so Garvey, or a kind of imperialism. And especially when you start to look at some of the pictures and images and caricatures of Marcus Garvey in the 40s and so on, you will see him, or 30s, see him riding in buggies and carts and wearing felt hats. You could clearly see European and imperialist influence on him when you start to look at the images and what he wears and so on and so forth. So Marcus Garvey had and Marcus and to an extent Martin Luther King Jr. Their kind of nationalism, their kind of civil rights and freedom was one that still was influenced by Eurocentric, a conservative brand of nationalism, or one that was Christian, as against Padmore and Malcolm X that promoted, in a sense, communistic or socialistic or humanist or anti-Christian. Malcolm X had promoted a kind of the nation of Islam, you notice the nation within the nation. But Marcus Garvey, in a sense, was also talking about the nation within the nation as well. So in a sense, Malcolm X draw influence from Marcus Garvey, who was also talking about a kind of black nation. But of course, he had started the Black Star shipping line, taking people back to Africa, and Marcus Garvey actually was successful in taking people back to Africa. In fact, many Americans and Caribbean people and Jamaicans who have businesses in Ghana today and live in Ghana today have successful business. In fact, many, I think, many places in Africa, Jamaicans are welcome, but in Ghana, they have a very strong Jamaican influence and population there, even today. And many of that had started from the Black Star Shipping Line or this Africa to African movement and drive. Let me stop sharing my screen. Why am I sharing this lady? Okay, sorry about that, guys. So that is important to note when you expect. So when you start to compare the nationalism, but we're gonna take a break from that because I want to continue pick up with this idea of nationalism some more, talking about the limitations of Garveyism and Black nationalism in a couple of minutes, because I want to go back to looking at come back to where we left last class, talking about what it is that defines or differentiates Cuba and Haiti from the other Caribbean islands, and what defines these two islands from the others is an issue of what I call the paradox of sovereignty. And the issue of sovereignty speaks to the overall theme of nationalism. Nationalism. So in a sense, this is quite interesting. It's a good flow here. It's a good segue. So as we look at what differentiates the islands of the Caribbean, and particularly in terms of the issue of sovereignty and granted freedoms as against taken freedoms, moving into the idea of nationalism, it will actually create a great opportunity for us to now delve into the issue of what separates these islands and the kind of independence that these countries have. So we're going to delve into it now. We're going to compare the islands of the Caribbean and delve into the lecture, looking at the paradox of freedom, picking up from where we left off last week. Okay, I'm going to actually share my screen. I'm going to stop sharing this particular screen. Let me stop sharing this. Hold up. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. So let me share my screen and get into this real quickly. I don't know if all of you had participated in the poll, but I think we had started this last week. There we go. Let me minimize this. But last week we had started this. The paradox of sovereignty. Cuba and Haiti's struggle for freedom and the challenge of development. And I asked the question, what do Haiti and Cuba not have in common with Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados? And of course, the options, these weren't the options, but the keys were poorest in the world, Black and brown peoples, granted freedoms, taken freedoms, embargoes and shaky diplomacy and international relations, debt, dependency, and non-competitiveness, formerly colonized peoples. And of course, the options were A, 2, 5, 6, and 7, B, 1, 4, and 5, C, 1 only, and 1 and 3 only, D, 3 and 4 only. And I think I can't see what's up there. 1, 3, and 4 only, I think. And the answer was B, 1, 4, and 5. And we looked at this last week. But I said today I want to delve, as we move into the issue of Garveyism and Black nationalism and neoliberal globalization, and the issue of the paradox of sovereignty. I want to take a deeper look. At this, taking freedoms and mixed results. And I said in the response that in the mosaic of the Caribbean, two nations, Cuba and Haiti, stand out, not only for their vibrant cultures and tumultuous histories, but also for the unique paths they traversed in their quests for freedom and independence. Now, while their counterparts, and while Haiti's and Cuba's counterparts, including the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago attained their freedoms through colonial concessions. Cuba and Haiti defiantly seized their destinies, forging independent nations amid the crucible of revolution and resistance. However, the seemingly notable act of self-liberation has been fraught with profound challenges, perpetuating a paradox wherein the pursuit of sovereignty has engendered poverty, instability, and diplomatic isolation on the world stage. Diplomatic isolation on the world stage. Cuba and Haiti's decision to take their freedoms into their own hands, eschewing the shackles of colonial rule, is emblematic of their fierce determination to chart autonomous development trajectories. Haiti's groundbreaking revolution in 1804 shattered the chains of slavery, establishing the world's first Black republic and inspiring peoples globally to aspire for liberation. Now, similarly, Cuba's revolution or revolutionary struggle in the 20th century, culminating in Fidel Castro's ascent to power in 1959, heralded a new era of socialist government and nationalism. However, the euphoria of liberation soon collided with the harsh realities of post-colonial existence as both nations grappled with the enduring legacies of exploitation, underdevelopment, and external interference. Despite their fervent aspirations for self-determination, Cuba and Haiti found themselves ensnared in a web of poverty, instability, and diplomatic isolation that has persisted to the present day. Now, the economic ramifications of their revolutionary choices have been particularly pronounced, with Cuba and Haiti languishing among the poorest nations in the world, plagued by endemic poverty, underdevelopment, and economic stagnation. Now, the absence of a robust international diplomacy and relations on the world stage has exacerbated their predicament, relegating them to the periphery of global affairs and limiting their capacity to harness international support and investment for sustainable development. Moreover, the imposition of embargoes, sanctions, and diplomatic isolation has further compounded their challenges, exacerbating economic hardship and perpetuating cycles of dependency on external aid and support. Now, that's not only the situation for Haiti and Cuba, but the diplomatic isolation. The diplomatic isolation is the part that is important. The imposition of embargoes, sanctions, and diplomatic isolation. Because none of the other islands have embargoes, sanctions, and diplomatic isolation. But Cuba and Haiti, they have that, which has further compounded their challenges, exacerbating economic hardship and perpetuating cycles of dependency on external aid and support. So while their counterparts in the Caribbean have leveraged international partnerships and diplomatic relations to boost their economies, and enhance their global standing, Cuba and Haiti have found themselves marginalized on the world stage, grappling with the consequences of their defiant pursuit of sovereignty. Now, I have said in the conclusion that the paradox of sovereignty confronting Cuba and Haiti underscores the complex interplay between freedom, one, development and diplomacy, in the, well, freedom one and development and diplomacy two in the Caribbean context. While their decisions to take their freedoms and independence have been laudable expressions of self-determination, self-determination is an important concept in nationalism, which we are about to visit in a couple of minutes. While their decision to take their freedoms, Haiti and Cuba's decision to take their freedoms and independence, have been laudable expressions of self-determination, the resultant challenges of poverty, instability, and diplomatic isolation highlight the enduring legacies of colonialism and the formidable obstacles of post-colonial development. I'm going to say this again. This is quite powerful and it is important. I said in conclusion, the paradox of sovereignty, the paradox of sovereignty. And the paradox of sovereignty is quite broad. The paradox of sovereignty does not only involve confronting the paradox of sovereignty does not only involve confronting Cuba and Haiti does not only involve confronting Cuba and Haiti on underscoring the complex interplay between freedom, development, and diplomacy in the Caribbean context, but it also involves several other factors that we must consider. But this one is quite paramount. The paradox of sovereignty confronting Cuba and Haiti underscores the complex interplay between freedom, development, and diplomacy in the Caribbean context. But it goes beyond that because it speaks to also the issue of identity. Okay, the issue of cosmopolitanism, which we hope to delve, I hope I have time to delve into that in this class. If we may not, but if we do, that would be great. Okay, the issue of cosmopolitanism in terms of who is the cosmopolitan, what must he be? The cosmopolitan like myself, the cosmopolitan like Homi Baba, those who are now living in the diaspora, the cosmopolitan, the paradox of sovereignty confronting Cuba and Haiti, or the paradox of sovereignty. It also challenges in the individual. The individual. And I'm going to talk about it in a second because I want to raise a side issue, but it relates to a larger issue of the paradox of sovereignty. Okay. But anyways, the conclusion is that the paradox of sovereignty confronting Cuba and Haiti underscores the complex interplay between freedom, development, and diplomacy in the Caribbean context. Now, while their decisions to take freedoms and independence have been laudable expressions of self-determination, the resultant challenges of poverty, instability, and diplomatic isolation highlight the enduring legacies of colonialism and the formidable obstacles to post-colonial development. Now, as the Caribbean navigates the complexities of the 21st century, the experiences of Cuba and Haiti serve as poignant reminders of the enduring struggle for sovereignty and the imperative of confronting the structural inequities that continue to shape the region's trajectory. Because, and I said, only through collective action and solidarity, can the Caribbean overcome the paradoxes of sovereignty and forge a path towards inclusivity and diversity for all its peoples. Collective action is important. And I believe, as I said to you, I'm going to say it again, I believe that when we were discussing the West Indian Federation, that kind of collective action that we were discussing, that was the kind of collective action that we need. A broader nationalism beyond independent nation states to one that is more cooperative nation states. But anyways, So that is for that in terms of looking at the paradox of sovereignty or the paradox of independence, looking at nationalism. Okay. Any questions so far? We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back at 4:25. And when we come back at 4:25, we want to continue looking at nationalism, and we're going to delve briefly into Eli Kadori's book Nationalism, looking at what nationalism is briefly, and highlighting some very important concepts from the book, from Eli Kadori's book Nationalism. Okay. So, but if you have any questions, please let me hear them. But if not, we'll take a quick 5 minutes break. We'll actually take a break. We come back at 4:30. Okay, and we will move into Eli Kadori's book Nationalism quickly. Just start lifting up, talking about nationalism, and then we transition into our main text, looking at the limitations of Garveyism and Black nationalism, and move and segueing into neoliberal globalization. Okay. All right, so if there's no question, we take a break. We come back at 4:30. We talk about what distinguishes Haiti and Cuba from the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados. But I want to provide a brief synopsis or overview of these islands, their socio-political economy, religions, demographics, and histories, and their current position today. Just briefly, first of all, Haiti, the socio-political economy of Haiti is that Haiti is one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere, and with a struggling economy primarily based on agriculture, particularly subsistence farming, and it faces challenges. Actually, before I get into this, did I ask you guys last week to identify a Caribbean island and to provide a brief synopsis of these islands, their socio-political economy, religion, demographics, and histories, and their current position today? Did I ask you guys to do that last week?
Yes, sir.
I just remembered. What did you guys come up with? I was just about to delve into them, but before I do that, let me see what you guys come up with. What did you guys do? Who wants to? What did you guys do? Anybody? Did you guys do it?
I did it. I don't know that the information necessarily covers everything.
That's fine. That's fine. This is over. Just it's okay. Just I wanted you guys to begin to familiarizing yourself with the other Caribbean islands. So whatever you have, and the fact that you're able to do it, that's great. And I would love to see what slant you take and the perspectives that you were able to gather concerning the island you chose. What island you chose?
I did Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay, all right. Tell me a bit about Trinidad and Tobago. What did you gather about Trinidad?
Okay, so in terms of their population, in terms of ethnicity,
Yes.
it's dominated primarily by two groups. And what I found out that I didn't know before is that the difference in the two groups is almost equal. So it would be those descended from those who were slaves in Africa.
Yes.
Then also the Indians who came as indentured laborers. But what is interesting is that it was very specific about the Indians. It was East Indians. So that was the specific information. Not sure what that means in terms of them saying East. But the Indians that came as indentured laborers were from the East. It makes me wonder if those were the darker Indians who would have been considered as the quote-unquote bottom of their caste system, but I didn't look into it any further. But it did.
Well, yeah, well, you're okay. Well, to say that they came from East India doesn't necessarily they were East Indian doesn't necessarily mean that they came from the eastern part of India. It necessarily means then, because when Christopher Columbus and the Europeans came, they were actually looking for India, like East India, but they ended up in the West Indies, and so we are called, we are West Indians.
Right.
So the East Indians, in a sense, would be the people from India, were considered Indians.
Which division now?
Yes,
Which division now?
However, you have pointed out something quite important in terms of in fleshing that out. Even though you are a little bit like off, it's fine because you are still onto something important because that is important. The the indentured servants or laborers who came from East India or from India to the Caribbean or Trinidad. A lot of them came to Trinidad, in fact, more than anywhere else. A lot of them went to Trinidad. But Trinidad it's still smaller than Jamaica, but a lot went to Trinidad. And yes, many of then you asked about what the type of the population, who were these indentured laborers? Because India, they had a caste system. Yes, many of them were dark Indians. Yes, you're right, and many of them came from the lower caste, in a sense. So yes, you are right to have pointed that out. So yeah, the population is diverse with significant Indo-Trinidadian and Afro-Trinidadian population.
That's what it says. It says Indo-Trinidadian.
Yes, alongside a smaller communities of European and Middle Eastern descent.
Yeah, right. So it says that the indentured laborers that came, they actually worked on the plantations after the abolition of slavery in the mid-19th century. And as you had alluded to, that there is that third group. But what is interesting is that it didn't refer to them as the third group minority. It referred to them as the slightly smaller third group.
Yes, they were small, definitely.
So it's as if it's almost, for me, how I interpret that is that it's possibly an even spread in terms of those of European descent versus African versus Indian. And it says that they were of mixed ethnicity. So it includes migrants from Spain, other European countries, Africa, as we know, East and Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. I wasn't expecting to hear Middle East, but that's
yes.
And in terms of their religious breakdown, they said that the country is 32.1% Protestant, 21.6% Roman Catholic, 18.2% Hindu, 4.9% Muslim, 1.5% Jehovah's Witness, 2.2% non-religious, and interestingly, it says the other or unknown religious practices that are there make up 19.5%. I found that part to be very shocking. And in terms of their population...
Wait, hold up. When you said... So hold up. Let me say that again.
Which part you want me to say again, sir?
Give me the breakdown of the religion.
Okay. Start? I'm going to start now?
Yes.
Okay, so for the Protestants, it's 32.1%.
Okay.
Roman Catholics make up 21.6%.
Okay.
The Hindus make up 18.2%.
Okay.
The Muslims make up 4.9%. Jehovah's Witnesses are 1.5%.
Okay.
The non-religious are 2.2%.
Okay.
And the shocking one, which says other religions or unknown religions, make up 19.5%.
Other religions, 19. What's this other religions?
It didn't give a breakdown. This is what the data showed it, but it didn't include like what the others could be. I am wondering if it would have been if it has anything to do with those that would have come in like through slavery, like Santeria and those. I wonder if it's those practices, but it didn't clarify, so I didn't go any further with it.
That's interesting. Okay, the reason why you're able to, I like how you were. I like your analysis. How you are analyzing here. You're saying, well, maybe these are. That means you're about to talk to us about the demographics. So maybe you're able to talk about those. So that's you said the Santeria, but where did you get that from?
I didn't. It was just like general knowledge, like what you learn in school, like in terms of the fact that there are practices that still would have remained more or less under the quiet, but what the Africans would have taken with them and held fast to, that have become different things like Pocomania and Santeria and Voodoo and those things.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if that is what the other represents.
Yes, you're right. Okay, you are right. The religion of Trinidad, they are diverse with Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, and Islam being the major religions alongside smaller communities practicing Afro-Caribbean religions. The Afro-Caribbean religions would be probably make up the 19.5%, they'll call them other or unknown religions, which it's not other or unknown, they're Afro-Caribbean religions. I don't know why they are, I don't know why they say other or unknown.
Okay.
Other or unknown. You know what they are. The other or the unknown are Afro-Caribbean practices or traditions.
Okay.
So that's what they are. By the way, so Protestant and Catholicism, they're Christian. So Christianity is actually 53.7%, with 32% being Protestant, 21% being Catholics. So that's why I wanted to give me the breakdown again. So 32%, so it's really 53.7% Christian, with 32% Protestant and 21% Catholics. And of course, Hindus from the Indian tradition.
Yeah.
So on. Okay. Right, and you're going to talk to us about...
the only other part that I have is their population and
yes,
the population and how they, in terms of how they live on the islands.
Go ahead.
So as at mid 2023, there were, or there, well, it was mid 2023. So let's just say there are 1,534,937 people living in Trinidad or on the islands of Trinidad and Tobago. 53.2% of their population live in the urban areas, and 46.8% live in rural areas. And I think that that's interesting to know, because when you think about it, where in light of Jamaica is like only like 1/8 of Jamaica live in the rural areas, and then everybody else pack up in Kingston.
Yes, wow.
So I actually kind of like the fact that it's almost an even split.
Kind of spread out. Yes, that is true. 53, but okay, you know what? You have to do more. You look at the population. Did you do a breakdown? How much?
I still have access to the document, so I can pull it up. It's right.
So what percent is black? What percent is Indian? In terms of what? I know we said. Did we talk about that? I know we said that.
We did, but I didn't get an exact figure. But I could look it up and then tell you.
Yeah, like is it like, I know at one time in terms of the Indo-Caribbean population was at one time 49%, and then the African population was at one time 51%, and there was always this back and forth between. So at one time it was 49% Indian, 51%, something of the sort, or it's just like that, 49-51, something like that. With the rest being either Middle Eastern or whatever at one. So now you're talking about the area. You said 53% live in rural, in urban, 46% live in rural. Now, it would be interesting to find out, of the 53% that live in the rural, in the urban, how many are they majority Afro-Caribbean, or is it a diverse mix? Why, in terms of the fact that you have this spread between 53% living in urban, 46% living in rural? Is it that 53% who live in the urban areas are majority of the Afro-Caribbean descent, and the 46% that lives in the rural are of Indo-Trinidadian descent? It would be interesting to find that out, because I know at one time, I don't know if you have anything to talk, if you're going to talk about their politics, and at one time they had an interesting politics with the African
Party and the
black. Yes. What is it?
You have the African party and the Indian party.
Yes. Right. That's the two parties.
Right.
And so while in Jamaica, it's the breakdown between the political parties is not in terms of the African and the Indian. Okay, it's not in terms of the culture or the people. It's in terms of just JLP or PNP traditions,
Yeah.
or it has nothing to do with the people. It's just more political ideology. That's it.
Yes.
You know.
So it says here, I'm for some of the things I never got the details, so I'm Googling. In terms of their parties,
Yeah.
saying that the political parties have generally run, as we said, along ethnic lines, with most Afro-Trinidadians or Trinidadians supporting the People's National Movement, the PNM, and most Indo-Trinidadians supporting various Indian majority parties, such as the current United National Congress. But yeah,
Wait. So who is in power now? The PNM or the UNC?
I feel like it's PNM, but let me
The
look.
PNM.
I think so. Let me look. Let me check. It is. Who has my phone?
At one time, it was the Basdeo Panday government that was in power.
Why isn't it coming up right away? Oh, the Prime Minister is from the PNM, Keith Rowley. So it's the PNM, the black people.
PNM. Okay. Yes. The PNM is so okay. But there's usually there's always fierce fighting between, in terms of what defines their political scene is really between the PNM and the UNC, in terms of between the the black side as against the Indian side, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, but their president is an Indian lady, but she is registered as independent.
Oh, okay. All right, that's quite interesting to know today. So they have an independent president who is not a member of the PNM or the UNC.
That's
Just so you know, okay, by the way, and it's quite interesting, their government, because they are not they are not they did not retain the Queen as the
right.
Queen of England, or Britain, as their head of state. So they have a republic, don't they? Trinidad has
Yes,
have a
it's the
president.
Republic of Trinidad and Tobago.
Right. So they have a president. They don't have a governor general, and they don't look to England. So they have that's what differentiates Trinidad from some of the other Caribbean islands, like Jamaica and Barbados and Bahamas.
But you know what I just found that is interesting, sir? Their president, who is an Indian lady, Christine Kangalu, she was a part of the PNM. She wasn't a part of the Indian party.
Oh, that's quite interesting. Okay, so maybe there had been changes. So I'm happy for this. So that maybe something to do. That's quite interesting. That's to know a woman who is an Indian who is unless she's so this is good. This is good. This is progress in India. I mean, sorry, in Trinidad.
Yeah. And she was with them from 2001 until 2015, and she became independent in 2015.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. That's good to find. The Trinidad and Tobago, by the way, they have a mixed economy with significant oil and natural gas reserves. Did you do anything on the economy? The country has a relatively high GDP per capita in the Caribbean region, but faces challenges with crime and high levels of income inequality and some amount of poverty. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you. You were very insightful. Very insightful. I know you probably submitted where did you get some of your information?
Honestly, this is Britannica.
Okay.
So Britannica, they have like the, what would you call it? Diagrams representing percentages and everything.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Information.
Well, I appreciate that. This is very good. Oh, who wants to go next? Who wants to go next?
Sir, I looked into Barbados.
Okay, Barbados. Okay, then let's hear about Barbados. Tell us about
the population at the 2010 consensus said that Barbados has an estimated population of 277,821.
Very, it's a very
tabulated
small country. 200 and how much?
277,821. The tabulated population was only 226,193 due to high undercounted, estimated at 18%. So ethnic groups, the population of Barbados is predominantly black, 92.4%, or mixed 3.1%. 2.7% of the population is white and 1.3% is South Asian. The remaining 0.4% of the population includes East Asian, 0.1% and Middle Eastern 0.1%. Official language of Barbados is English, right? According to another census that was tabulated 2010, it says 75.6% of the population of Barbados is considered Christian, 2.6% have a non-Christian religion, and 20.6% have no religion. In terms of power,
Say this again.
In which part, sir?
The religion.
Oh yeah. It says that 75.6% of the population of Barbados is considered Christian. 2.6% have a non-Christian religion, and 20.6% have no religion.
Wow, 20.6. That's really high. Maybe that 20.6 they mean other or unknown religion, and which involves Afro-Caribbean, because depending on where you get your information, they probably because they may not have a religion, but sometimes they may have traditions. But the population is quite interesting. Notice when you talk about Trinidad, they never talked about mixed race, but Barbados, they talk about mixed race. You notice that? A minority of mixed race.
Yes, sir.
And and they both have people of European descent, but Barbados particularly, after they had their independence, and even after that, but you find that a lot of the plantocracy remained on the island of Barbados. Okay, and yes, they have a minority of mixed race. Do you know the population of the size of the mixed race? Is it what, 1%, 2%?
Mixed race, I just know that 92.4% is black. Mixed is 3.1%.
Yeah, mixed is 3.1%, which is still significantly high, thinking, because they have 200,000 people, and probably it's even higher than that in terms of the mixed race. It's probably higher than that, and because even the people who are of African descent, many of them have a lot of European ancestry. Okay, so anyway, but it's quite interesting. But continue.
It's stated here, along with religion, if you wanted to know more, it says Anglicanism constitutes the largest religious group with 23.9% of the population. It is represented by the church in the province of the West Indies, within which the island belongs to the Diocese of Barbados. Pentecostals are the second largest group, 19.5%. The next largest group are Seventh-day Adventists, 5.9% of the population, followed by Methodists, 4.2%. 3.8% of the population are Roman Catholics. Other Christians include Wesleyans, 3.4%. Nazarenes is 3.2%. Church of God, 2.4%. Jehovah's Witness, 2.0%. Baptist 1.8%, Moravians 1.2%, Brethren 0.5%, Salvation is 0.4%, and the Latter Day Saints 0.1%. Other religions group include Rastafarians 1.0% of the population, which was introduced to Barbados in 1975. Hindus 0.5%, Jews 0.05%, and the Baha is 0.04%, and Buddhists. In terms of government, it is the Unitary Parliamentary Republic. Yeah, that's the party in power.
Okay.
They do have demographics in terms of the summer of the 2022 Barbadian general election, but I don't think we could go in there. The leader is Madam President, in former Her Excellence formal. That was head of state, resident state of house. Sandra Mason since 30th of November 2021. That's the last time.
Another, well, wow, it's quite a few. Another woman again that's at the helm in the Caribbean, right?
Yes, sir. Let me see who is the current.
By the way, just so you know, the history of Barbados. Barbados was colonized by the British and was a significant hub in the transatlantic slave trade, and they gained independence from Britain in 1966. On the other hand, Trinidad and Tobago, and it's kind of interesting. Barbados was only colonized by Britain. Trinidad and Tobago, on the other hand, they were colonized by the Spanish, the British, the Dutch, and French. But the last country that colonized them were the British, and they got independence from Britain in 1962. But so Trinidad and Tobago had multiple colonial masters that changed hands. The Spanish, the Dutch, the French, the British. While in Barbados, it was just the British. Okay. Anyway, so that's important.
Yes, sir. The
Continue.
current Prime Minister is Mia Mottley since 2008.
Who?
Mia Mottley since 2018. That's it.
Okay. Since 2008?
2018.
Oh, okay. All right, good, good. All right, thank you so much. By the way, just so you know that Barbados has a relatively high development index. Just like Cuba, they have a high development index, and it's known for its beautiful beaches and tourism industry. Barbados recently transitioned to a republic. So the information that you are giving me, it's kind of outdated a little bit because now they have a president. Okay, so Barbados recently got rid of the Queen. Okay, it recently transitioned to a republic. I'm just making that, letting you guys know right now. Since recently, Barbados transitioned to a republic, severing ties with the British monarchy. Only Jamaica hasn't done so. What is waiting on Jamaica to do that? They have, Jamaicans have a love affair with the Queen. Oh, sorry, with Britain, with the monarchy. I'm telling you that. But anyway, so now Barbados is the newest. Wow, I cannot believe Barbados beat us. Wow. Anyways, anything else you want to add? By the way, Barbados has a mixed economy. They have a mixed economy with a strong emphasis on tourism and financial services, like Cayman Islands. Now, Barbados faces challenges such as high debt levels, like Jamaica and other Caribbean islands, and vulnerability to natural disasters. Just so you know. But as I said to you some time ago, no, they're not beset by crime and violence. And the last time I did a check, I sometimes peruse the newspapers for the Caribbean islands. When I go on Barbados, hardly any crime. If there's a crime, one guy slashed somebody's hand with a knife. That's that much. Or there's a theft in a store or something like that. That's it. Or no slashing a knife. Sorry, somebody stole a bag. So that's the main news. And it comes on the front. But there's not much crime and violence in Barbados. But thank you so much, Gavion. I appreciate that. What is your source?
Source, give me a second, let me look back again. The source is the government of Barbados. It says Barbados Integrated Government, BIG.
Okay, all right. So you went straight to the source.
Yes, sir.
Gavion, you went straight to the source.
Yes, sir.
Nothing against you, Alisa. Okay, because that's still that's an independent, in a sense, an independent source. Okay. But thank you so much, guys. Alisa. Thank you, Gavion. Who is next? Who is next? Anybody wants to? Who wants to go next? Felmin, Jessica, Alan, Renee. Who wants to go next?
So I didn't get around to doing it, sir.
Okay, but fine. It's okay if you did, but is there any Caribbean island that you know a little bit about that you want to just quickly introduce to us?
No, you know, sir, I don't know. Only Caribbean island I visited would be Trinidad. So, and that's already gone, sir. So I don't
When
know.
you visited Trinidad, what was your experience in Trinidad?
It was good 'cause I was with family, but I was in summer school. I was there because I was there for the whole summer. That was
Summer school, as you mean, what, in high school?
no, man. This would have been prep school.
Prep school?
That would have been it was difficult. Some amount of bullying considering I was Jamaican. But overall it was a beautiful.
When was this? When was this?
This would have been when I would have been 9 or 10, sir.
Okay, so that's like 2000 and something.
About 20 years ago, sir. Yeah.
Wait, can we just take a pin at the bullying because you're Jamaican?
Yeah.
Oh wow, it's quite interesting. I want to know more about that.
Right.
Okay, tell me what I mean. How did that happen? Why were you being bullied? How were you able to navigate and to live beyond that and to rise above that? And tell me about that experience.
Well, sir, it would have started with my sister first. And of course, I'm being the younger brother coming in to save the day, but also in that getting some of the bullying myself. But I'm a fighter, sir. So,
Yes.
long story short, I got in trouble for fighting. And after that, the bullying kind of stopped, but it was definitely rooted to the fact that
You're
Jamaican. Yeah.
Okay. Did they feel offended or threatened, or what were some of the words or the descriptions? How did they describe you?
I'm more just looking at you as lesser than. I think there's, I don't know. That was probably the time that I came to realize that there was this, rivalry between the two countries that's not justified in any way, but just between the two countries. There was, yeah, but it didn't affect me in any way, sir. Mostly though, it came, if I could recall properly, it would have been from more of the Indian side. That would have, I would have.
I should have asked. Were you in an area that was predominantly Indian?
I couldn't tell you, sir. I don't even remember.
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell you. No.
But okay, that's quite interesting. And I lived in Cayman Islands for a while, and I have heard that some persons, a lot of Jamaicans are not liked, although there are a lot of Jamaicans there. But in some ways, there's still some kind of perception of feeling or attitudes towards Jamaicans. I mean, one of what I've heard about Jamaica is that, first of all, yes, there's rivalry between the Caribbean islands, especially between Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, for dominance, I guess. I don't know, which is good. It's healthy. Competition is healthy. However, but there is rivalry. But many people think some people in the Caribbean believe that Jamaica is because Jamaica pulled out of the West Indian Federation, and many people blame Jamaica for the demise or the fall of the West Indies Federation. So in a sense, there was a lot of bad blood, political bad blood, I guess, and I don't know if there are stories that were passed down. I didn't know about this West Indian Federation and that we had pulled out and we were responsible until I went to the Cayman Islands and was serving as a minister in the Cayman Islands. And I had conversations with various people and it was then that I learned of the some kind of mixed feelings among some Caribbean peoples towards Jamaicans as it relates to several issues. One, the West Indian Federation. Two, they feel like Jamaicans were too involved in many of their countries and decision making, or many people. But of course, Cayman Islands was part of Jamaica at once, and many of Cayman Islands offices were administered by Jamaicans, or in some sense they utilized many Jamaican services and so on. So I don't know if that played a role in it, but yeah, it's quite interesting. I don't know if attitudes have changed and as it relates to between the two countries, and or attitudes towards Jamaica in terms as it relates to the West Indian Federation. It's quite interesting to discuss, Caribbean islands and how closely connected we are. And I have argued that as much as we are close and we have West Indies cricket and we have similar experiences and so on, I don't believe that we are as connected as we ought to be. We are still insulated, especially the citizenry, the population. Probably politically we are not in terms of the CARICOM, when we have big meetings and so on, but that as far as our connections and the dialogue and between the Caribbean islands. Yes, Ali said.
Sir, I just find it very interesting that it would have been as a child that Matthew would have been exposed to something like that, because that isn't a concept I became aware of until I was in probably high school.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even a matter of the fact that it's a rivalry between the two islands, but it's a problem that one has with the other. Because even to refer to the West Indies Federation, it was he wouldn't have been the prime minister yet. The premier of Trinidad and Tobago is the one that said 1 from 10 leaves 0. And on that basis, he is the one that withdrew Trinidad from the West Indies Federation. But what is interesting is that federation was not wholly Caribbean led. It was the British who dissolved it. So who was really at the helm of it anyway, if you get what I'm saying? So it's like...
Well, it was within the interest of the British to dissolve the Caribbean or the West Indian Federation. First of all, I don't believe that it because if the West Indies were to have, the West Indian countries were to have formed an alliance and get an independence en bloc and became a juggernaut, it would rival Britain, it would rival America, the US, it would rival many of the post-industrial countries in a sense. But when they are smaller, it's easier for them to control. It's okay. Not only that, it's much more difficult for islands of the Caribbean to compete on the world stage as well. So in a sense, it was within the British to dissolve it and for them not to have. And of course, 1 from 0 leaves 1 from 10 leaves 0, because in a sense the West when Jamaica decided to pull out, Jamaica was one of the most powerful countries at the time, and of course they had bauxite and all of that, and Jamaica's GDP was the strongest in the Caribbean. Okay, the currency was rival that of the US. So when Jamaica pulled out, it was, yes, devastating for the Caribbean, for the other Caribbean islands. But I think also the other Caribbean islands, in a sense, they also were contemplating pulling out, and in a sense there was a wider agreement, but Jamaica pulled out first. So and then of course in a sense it was convenient to point the finger on Jamaica when other Caribbean governments wanted the same thing, but it was easy for them to point to Jamaica for doing that. But even so, today I believe that we need to learn from that as Caribbean countries. And I think that our Caribbean governments must do more to facilitate integration and cooperation. Okay. I know we have UE and so on, but I think there need to be greater cooperation between and among Caribbean countries. We need to support Caribbean products, support Caribbean services and solutions. We need to become more aware of what other Caribbean islands are doing, what they are not doing, what support they can do, what products that we can purchase, what products that they can purchase. Active trade happening between islands of the Caribbean. Well, I know, say for example, Guyana at one point exported, I think, rice to Jamaica, and Jamaica was exporting to other parts of the Caribbean. And I know there's been a greater move towards that. But yes, economically, politically, but even amongst the businesses, in terms of our people in our business, there need to be a greater movement and a more active policy, a deliberate policy towards facilitating networking and connection between peoples of the Caribbean as a way to facilitate this dream of a West Indian Federation, whereby we can now work together and compete as a people with similar experiences and interests. So that's one thing to consider. But thank you so much, Alan and Alisa and Gavion. Who wants to go next? Anybody else? Let me see. Can I call on somebody? Let me see. I'm going to call on someone. Let's go with Felmin. Felmin, are you there? Felmin.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Tired.
I apologize that you're tired. The class will finish soon. We have another hour to go. But were you able to do this assignment, or were you able to do research on any Caribbean island?
No, I didn't get to finish it, to be honest, sir. I didn't get to look at it at all, to be honest.
Have you visited any Caribbean? Have you visited any Caribbean island?
Nope, I've only traveled once, and it was to the US 2 years ago.
Okay. Okay. But what do you know of any Caribbean island that we have not discussed?
Well, listening to the others, they would have touched on Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados. You know the stigma, or the thing that they have against us, the grudge, I would put it lightly. They don't really like us, and they tend to want to look down on us. So those are the things that I know of and hear of, and to some extent would have witnessed with persons that I would have interacted with from the Caribbean island, and some persons also indirectly as well. And I know of others who would have had bad experiences with them. I know that there's some rivalry between Jamaica, Trinidad, and the Barbados.
What is this rivalry? Okay, fine. I guess I know. Okay, what we talk about rivalry, one, stemming from what Alan had said in terms of his experience as a boy, briefly in Trinidad, and how he was bullied because he was Jamaican. And of course, we said that part of that, especially from the Indian side. And I have experienced, no, well, not bully or competition, but in being in Cayman Islands, we've heard of many Jamaicans are, in a sense, not liked in a sense, or looked down upon in a sense, or there's some negative attitudes. Some people, not me, it's not everywhere, some places. So let me not generalize. And we're saying, and of course, there's always been this rivalry between Caribbean islands, and that's healthy. But of course, you talk about the issue of looking down. Of course, we play football today. In CONCACAF, we have a CONCACAF, or we have a Caribbean competition, and we compete in terms of football and cricket and track and field. But this competition stemmed, and I said to you, part of the problem, of course, Jamaicans were blamed for pulling out of the West Indian Federation. But of course, we said that probably that's an argument from convenience. But But we, in a sense, when you have people who are, black people have a tendency of competing amongst themselves.
Right.
We have a
That's
tendency of
true.
competing amongst ourselves, which has also affected our ability to compete globally with other peoples if we think in categories and live in a world based in categories. But of course, I'm thinking that for the world, for the world to be better, for the world to not decay or devoid into decadence and decay and so on, and to continue on a path to progress, I have said that we need to move away from thinking in terms of categories and race and privilege and special interests. Yet we have a world where people just are naturally inclined to think and in those ways and to group themselves in to work in groups. And then of course, then there are some people who would point to animals, say, well, look at what had, they would say, look at what happened in the animal kingdom, or point to nature and say, see, so, and then come to the conclusion, then it stands to reason then that, okay, so human beings aren't any different. But that's, you could say that's a pseudo appeal to association, as if human beings are animals. In fact, human beings exceptionalize themselves, distinguish themselves from other animals as higher order creatures who have the ability to think intelligently. Yet, when people want to make a judgment about certain things, they point to nature and to animals, which I find ambivalent and perplexed. You said that human beings have a natural inclination and drive to group themselves. So therefore, so you start with that premise. You look to nature. Okay, fine, we look to nature. We call that, let's use logic, whether through inductive method or the deductive method of reasoning. Okay, using pseudo appeal, or let's not call it pseudo, because pseudo means false. So let's say using an appeal to what? To nature. So people, okay, nature, animals, they usually group themselves. But there's also animals that are solitary beings, but a lot of animals work in terms of groups, mammals and so on. And if human beings bear any resemblance to animals, and they say human beings are animals too, so they would then say, okay, human beings are animals. And if you look at the animal kingdom, pointing to lower classes of animals, they operate like that, and then come to a conclusion. Therefore, human beings, but therefore, it's okay for human beings to act in terms of their connections and their groupings and so on. But then I would push back and say, excuse me, no. Again, I say this. I disagree with that. It's a pseudo appeal to association. Pseudo appeal. Pseudo. That's a question begging epitaph. A pseudo is a fallacy. It's a fallacy. Fallacy is a false argument. It's a pseudo appeal to association. False appeal to something. It's like, in other words, comparing apples to bananas, apples to oranges. Sorry, apples to oranges. Okay, it's like comparing apples to oranges. Human beings distinguish and exemplify themselves as being higher order animals, part of the human race that we're intelligent beings. Okay, so therefore, yeah. So just because other lower animals do that, okay, how can we then draw our conclusions about ourselves from looking at lower beings who we are exceptional from? But we are much more exceptional from those beings. So I'm not. So then, if that's critical thinking, you have to ask yourself. But anyways, I said, what am I getting at? We're saying that we say black people, in a sense, but maybe that's how we were colonized in this Western world to think. That is okay. That to think in those ways, to prevent us from competing in the ways that we need to compete in order to get to the next level. But as I said to you again, in order to move, if the world is to ever continue to develop and to progress, or to preserve destruction and calamity, It is for us to move away from thinking in terms of category. In fact, since we are all theologians, or we are scholars of the Bible, we are all philosophers. Yes? And if we are all philosophers, then we all think in certain ways. Actually, the point I was making, I've forgotten the point. I've lost it. I was about to make a very poignant and powerful point about we all being thinkers, and I forget completely the point I was going to make. So, but anyways, let's move on. We're looking at the fact that we are. I can't remember. I was going to make a powerful point, and I can't remember. But But the point is made already. So we move on. We are comparing islands of the Caribbean. We're talking about how black
Hello,
people.
good afternoon.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Renee. Renee, what's
Yes.
up? How are you?
I didn't get to do the assignment, but I have had the chance to temporarily live in Trinidad and Antigua.
Wait, hold on. You live in Antigua?
Temporary, yes. I was.
Oh, tell me about Antigua. Tell me about Antigua.
Well, it is a wonderful country, but it is not as developed as Jamaica. There is still a lot of board buildings.
When did you live in Antigua?
When?
Yeah.
I think it was in 2014, 2015.
Okay, recently. That's not too far from now. Continue.
Yes, so I work, as a lot of Jamaicans are in Antigua and Trinidad, and they mostly works in security companies. In Antigua, Jamaicans normally work along with the Antiguans and also the Guyanese. In Trinidad, they don't like Jamaicans. One of the reasons that I have observed is that when Jamaicans go to Trinidad, they have an aim to make money. So they are kind of
When
when they go to Trinidad, their aim is to make money.
Yes.
So they are work driven. So they will do like double shift, triple shifts. Whenever it comes around carnival season, Trinidadians don't like to work, they like to party and drink most of the time. So in those times, Jamaicans normally get to work more and get more income. And I think that's one of the reasons why Trinidadians love Jamaican in regard to the work area.
The work ethic.
Like the supervisors, because typically they don't like Jamaicans, but like the supervisors, they will gravitate towards them because they are always available to work.
Okay.
Yes.
So okay. Oh wow. Wait. That's we talk about. Wait. Hold up. That's quite interesting. They don't like Jamaicans. They don't. You said they don't like Jamaicans for the same reasons they like Jamaicans.
Yes.
Okay.
Are the co-workers? I don't know if it's jealousy, but the co-workers they don't typically gravitate towards Jamaicans, right? But because Jamaicans go, they are willing to work 2 shifts. Like they will stay on, for example, a security location. They will stay there for 2 days if it needs be. So whenever the head is short, they are always available to work. So I think this is one of the reasons why the co-workers are those that are at the same level as though the Jamaicans who go to work, they don't really like them. If you understand what I'm saying.
Wow, this sounds yes, I understand. I mean, we're talking about the value placed on people. Talk about the value of the slave, the value of the individual, the value of the immigrant. Or so on. Say for example, the slaves are seen as big teeth with sharp heads. I was speaking poetic terms, but he's only seen um, as a hero in terms of what he can do to cleaning neoliberal waste. The Jamaican as valuable only to clean waste, only because he can work 10 and 15 jobs. Oh, okay. But at the same time, when the Jamaican works 10 and 15 jobs and make money, that's also a problem. So the Jamaican, so it's okay, the Jamaican is liked if he is a worker, but if he is an earner, he is not liked.
No.
So it's the earner versus the worker.
Yes.
Okay. So the Jamaican as an earner is despised upon, but the Jamaica as a worker is embraced.
Yes.
Oh wow, that's good. Yeah, this is interesting. I would love, there are people, that's in, in the U.S. or the Jamaican diaspora. Say for example, the post-industrial country where Caribbean, we have a Caribbean diaspora. We have and the Caribbean, we work together here in the diaspora, and there's a Caribbean diaspora movement. And the Caribbean diaspora people, when they are outside of their locale, they are united and there is no grudge. But within their locals, there is grudge. Quite interesting. When we are together outside of the Caribbean, living in the global north, the Caribbean peoples they work together in groups, they live together in communities, they go to church together, they worship together, they see themselves as Caribbean peoples, not necessarily like Jamaicans, or they see them as Caribbean peoples, and many of them form Caribbean groups and movements and associations, and when it's time for the pen release, yes, big Jamaica. Okay, and of course I understand Jamaican influence in the world is major. Jamaican influence in the world is big, to be honest. It is big. It is major. From the track and field stars and the Bob Marley, which is absolutely major, and the Usain Bolt and the Merlin Nati, it is major. So, and in a sense, Jamaica, I don't want to sound biased, but in a sense, Jamaica would sometimes be seen as the US of the Caribbean, in a sense. You go to some of I said to you one time, if you go some of the stores, they call them that you said a Jamaican store. Everybody know what a Jamaican store is. But if you say Trinidadian store, they think Trinidad is a parish in Jamaica. Or many Trinidadian or the Caribbean islands, instead of saying Trinidad or Antigua or Barbados or Bajan restaurant, they said no, Caribbean and Jamaican cuisine. Okay. All right. So, but Jamaicans don't say Caribbean. They say Jamaica because everybody knows Jamaican. Okay, and they know it's island. But in fact, some people think that some Americans think that Jamaica is an African country. And if you're watching this or listening to this recording, Jamaica or the Caribbean islands, they are not African countries. Okay, they're part of the Americas. Just so you know. Then okay, but that's very important to point out. Anything, but let me see if there's anything else I wanted to say. Okay, the perception of people within and those without. What about Antigua?
Antigua is not as bad. Sometimes there's jealousy between the Guyanese and Jamaican, but the work environment, it is not as bad as Trinidad. It is not as tense as Trinidad.
Yeah.
And if once you work, you will get good locations and good positions, so it is much fairer. But however, Antigua is a bit limited. All right. If a Jamaican wants to go to Antigua to migrate to Antigua, it is much easier. But Trinidad is more what must I say, secured. They hardly grant permit. It's not easy to acquire permit. But Antigua, it is more easier. Once you're with a company, they can sponsor you going and you get your work permit. So it is much easier there.
Oh, yeah, that's another thing. I remember one time the Caribbean islands were fighting against each other in terms of using immigration policy requiring each other to have visas, because one time it was free to go to some Caribbean islands, and then sometime in the 90s or in the 2000s, there was I don't know what was going on between some of the Caribbean islands. They started requiring visas. okay, which I believe requiring visas also help to promote Caribbean separation and dividedness. If you want to promote Caribbean integration, Caribbean Federation, the Caribbean community, the Caribbean community in the diaspora is strong, but within the Caribbean, I think there is also that's needed. The Caribbean integration is weak. As much as people want to, recently the Prime Minister, oh, West Indian Federation is strong. That's only in words. Look at whole Caribbean. We need to do a study. We need to do a study of Caribbean peoples. What is your perception of? Okay, fine. We see how Jamaica. Well, I'm asking you, Alan and Renee and myself. What is your perception of the Caribbean? And what is your perception of the Caribbean people? Perception of you living in the Caribbean is quite interesting. That's very, because teaching this course, I've always talked about the perception of the Jamaican or the perception of the Caribbean as it relates to the global North perception of the Caribbean. But what of the Caribbean perspective of the Caribbean, especially the Caribbean, between the islands? And we talk about Caribbean cooperation. Many people are upset with me and think that I'm wrong, and unfollow me and unfriend me. But I am not wrong. I am going to be bold. Caribbean integration of how Caribbean requiring visas to travel within the Caribbean does not promote, challenges West Indian Federation and cooperation. Okay, that is still lacking in the Caribbean. I'm telling you that. But as much as in fact, as much as we can facilitate some trade and export among the Caribbean, but also cooperation among our peoples, and also exposure and awareness among our peoples is very vital. Very vital. But what about the language and how they speak, Renee, in terms of Antigua, the language, and tell me about the experience there and the peoples, how they live as against Jamaica, tell me about that.
All right, for me, it wasn't that bad because there's a lot. When I say there's a lot of Jamaicans, there is a lot of Jamaican. Just like how we have like.
Is it similar though? Yeah, they have. Yes, go ahead.
It is similar. Like how we have patois, they have some. I don't know the term to use now, but they have some little sayings like if you are talking to them, they will say tal, which means no, or with a joke at all. So they have their little I don't know the term to use right now, sorry, but they have that for them to
Creole.
Yeah, Creole.
Okay.
Yes. And apart from that, it is good. The experience was good. I'm sorry, I lose train of thought. What was the question again? Remind me of the question that you were asking.
In terms of what about their development, and how developed is, and you said Antigua is limited, it's not as developed as Jamaica?
No. I would never give up Jamaica for Antigua. One thing I have been looking at being to Trinidad, because I have had the opportunity to go to the US. And I'm looking at Trinidad. Why are so many Jamaicans migrating to Trinidad and Antigua? And I wonder if it's because they haven't had the chance to visit a first world country, because a lot of persons gravitate towards this country because of job opportunities.
Okay.
But for example, Antigua is very limited, because when I was living there, I was thinking I had to pursue a higher education, and looking around, there wasn't many options for me there. So unless it would have been in a medical field, which is very expensive, because their medical school is basically like a US school located in Antigua, based on my information that I received back then.
Wait, so Antigua doesn't have a university or a college?
It has college, but I'm not remember what the college was focused on. But like Jamaica, where you have UE, where you have a vast variety of different degree program. Antigua does not have that.
Okay. Yes, a lot of Caribbean islands don't have that. They have to travel, or they may have some international school, and as well. So yes, say for example, Haiti, Cuba, the education system is good. Haiti, Cuba, and then there's UE. That's where in terms of Guyana, Barbados, I think as well, Jamaica, um, Trinidad and Tobago. I think did they establish a campus on Bahamas? I think that's yeah. But thank you so much. Thank you. That was good. We have much more islands. Haiti, we said that Haiti, socio-political economy, poorest country in the Western Hemisphere with a struggling economy, primarily based on agriculture, particularly subsistence, farming, and it faces challenges such as political instability, corruption, and natural disasters. Currently, their prime minister is installed, and their last president was assassinated. Um, the religions, most Haitians practice Catholicism blended with traditional African religions known as Voodoo. In some instances, people would say that the national religion of Haiti is Voodoo, and some people say it's Catholicism. In terms of the demographics, the population of Haiti is predominantly of African descent, with a small minority of mixed race and European descent. But the history of Haiti is that Haiti was the first independent nation in Latin America and the Caribbean, born out of successful slave rebellion against French colonial rule in the early 19th century. But Haiti today continues to face challenges with political instability, poverty, and natural disasters. And of course, Haiti received international aid but struggles to achieve significant economic development. Cuba, on the other hand, has a socialist economy with state control over industries. State control over industries. Cuba has faced economic challenges exacerbated by the US embargo, but has a relatively strong healthcare and education system. Of course, we said that the US embargo is imposed on Cuba, partly because Cuba has adopted a socialist or communist style of government, which opposes US style of government, which they had tried unsuccessfully to impose on the Cuban territory. And as such, they imposed an embargo, preventing them from engaging and exchanging in the now. When Obama became president, he tried to loosen the embargoes, but or the restrictions. But since Donald Trump came to power, he reestablished those embargoes. In terms of the religion of Cuba, Cuba is predominantly Christian with a significant influence of Santeria, a syncretic religion. Combining or combing elements of Catholicism and African religions in Cuba. Okay, and just so you know, Cuba is not devoid of its African influence, although it has a strong. Well, let's look at the demographics. The population is diverse with significant Afro-Cuban. Many people don't know that. A significant Afro-Cuban and mixed race population alongside European descent. Okay, they have a significant Afro-Cuban, and I realized that many Jamaicans in the late 1800s and even in the 1900s and even throughout went to Cuba, and many of them intermingled and interloped with the Europeans there. My great grandfather was white, and he met my great grandmother, who was from Cuba, who was living on the island of Cuba at the time. Okay, but Cuba gained independence from Spain in the late 19th century, and later became a socialist state under Fidel Castro's leadership after the Cuban Revolution in 1959. And the current position of Cuba is that despite the economic challenges, Cuba has has a relatively high human development index. Cuba has a relatively high human development index. And we said that the last time, compared to other Caribbean nations. Its political system remains under scrutiny internationally. And of course, the kind of system, we say that they have a kind of socialist government that has control over most industries. Because the state control most industries, it limits penetration. That was part of the problem. Because they limit penetration, it was difficult then it limits international interference, hence the embargo as well. Now let's look at the Dominican Republic. We don't have much time left, so I'm going to quickly go through what I have here. The Dominican Republic, the socio-political economy of the Dominican Republic. Let me do a new share here. What are you seeing on my screen? Are you seeing socio-political economy?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Jamaica is number 4 and Trinidad is number 5.
Great. So the Dominican Republic has a mixed economy with sectors like tourism, agriculture, and manufacturing contributing significantly. It faces challenges such as income inequality and environmental degradation. One of my friends just went to DR and he stayed on a resort, he and a couple of his friends, and they said that they were a bit nervous to go outside, and they didn't get. I asked them to go to Haiti. They didn't get to go to Haiti, but they said that they did get a chance to go into the local communities, and there was a lot of poverty. A lot of infrastructural issues. So it was quite interesting, and it's almost all of the Caribbean islands. And when we watch Life and Death, it's almost the same thing. In parts of Jamaica too, you find where you have tourists, the tourism areas of hotels, there are areas of lack, squatter settlements, zinc fencing, slum communities as well, alongside beautiful edifices and hotels. You find that in Dominican Republic as well. So yes, so Dominican Republic, like some Caribbean islands, face challenges such as income inequality and environmental degradation. Now, really, again, the religion is Catholicism. Catholicism is the dominant religion in DR, but there's also a growing Protestant population. It's growing rapidly. The demographics of Dominican Republic is that the population is predominantly of mixed race, mulatto descendant with significant African and European influences. At one time, the Dominican Republic, the peoples of Dominican Republic declared themselves white, or refused to associate themselves with their African side because of their history. Because the Dominican, because DR was colonized briefly. They were colonized by Spain, but later occupied by Haiti before gaining independence in the 19th century. And so they had declared themselves once white, or more drawing up their European influences. And even up to today, many of them still consider themselves white. And in fact, when Haiti was experiencing say for example, Haiti today, they share border with DR, but their Dominican Republic, they have excommunicated, they have killed, and they have had a very restrictive policy or draconian policy towards Haiti and Haitians. Okay, so in terms of the current position of the Dominican Republic, they have seen economic growth in recent years, but still grapples with issues like corruption and inequality. I won't talk about Jamaica yet because you guys know about Jamaica. But fine, we thought Jamaica has a mixed economy with tourism, agriculture, including the renowned Jamaican coffee, Blue Mountain coffee, and sugar, and mining and bauxite being key sectors. But of course, it faces challenges such as crime, poverty, and unemployment. Crime, poverty, unemployment, and also high amount of inequality. Okay, um, the majority of Jamaicans are Christians with significant influence of Rastafarianism. In terms of the demographics, the population is predominantly of African descent, and the history is that Jamaica was born. Well, we were colonized by the British, but before that, Spain. We were a significant hub in the transatlantic trade. We gained independence from Britain in 1962. Um, we talked about Trinidad already. Oh, by the way, in terms of the current position of Jamaica, if I were to ask you what the current position of Jamaica is, I mean, we don't have much time, so we can't go through that. But Jamaica is diverse. We are known for our music, our sports. Economic growth has been modest over the last couple of years. In fact, we are growing in terms of our export. We weren't earning much from our export, but the last report I saw about a couple of months ago or weeks ago is that I think our export we were gaining it. We had a significant increase in terms of our income from export earnings. I think it was up at 30%. Not only that, crime was significantly down, has been and over the last couple of weeks and months. But you guys had challenged that. But what I've heard is that in terms of crime and violence, because the country faces challenges in terms of crime and debt, but there has been a significant move towards reducing crime in Jamaica. What is crime in Jamaica now, guys? Anybody know what's going on in terms of crime and debt and poverty and unemployment? What's going on there?
I had seen a report a few weeks ago published by the GIS.
Yeah, what's going on?
In terms of the crime rate, that it had been down by, I think it was a significant number but it was just for the January period.
Okay.
I'm going to try to find it back and tell you, but I do recall seeing that specifically. Just give me a second, please, sir.
Yes. And I think go ahead.
That's for Jamaica, right?
Yes.
I think they say it's about 40% in comparison to last year this time.
A 40% reduction?
Yeah, that's in terms of the murder rate overall. It's more focused on the murder rate, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh well, that's significant. That's truly significant. That is truly significant.
It was this time last year.
That is truly significant, if that's the case. Hold up.
Sorry, because I was looking, I got distracted, but should I still say what it was that I found?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, the headline from the GIS said serious crimes at lowest rates in 22 years. And that information was according to the Prime Minister. He said that serious crimes, including murder, shootings, rape, robbery, and break-ins, are down by 10.7%, the lowest in 22 years. He further informed that murders were down by 7.8% in 2023 when compared to 2022, and in the first 22 days of 2024, murders are down 21.9% relative to 2023.
That's very good. That's actually really good. What are they doing differently in Jamaica in terms of what is the okay? You know what we need to, we need to look at? We need to look at crime and violence, and especially excess murders are down. What about poverty and income inequality? And so that we can do a correlational comparison. Is poverty down? Is unemployment high? Is income inequality down? What anybody know in terms of poverty figures, the latest poverty figures for Jamaica? Anybody?
Sir, what is permeating the air now is from the politicians.
Yes.
So, but to give you a figures, what we may be able to come up with is what the politicians is spewing all over the place because this coming Monday is a local government election. So
well,
the figures that are circling right now is, I don't want to say that they are not true, but you know, it's from a different perspective. But overall, the last thing I heard from a starting report, I can't give you the percent, that yes, unemployment is down, and even though some are going to see it, unemployment is down and the economy is going, we still not see it, but according to their report. So I can't give you a figure, but I'm sure my colleague who is looking it up right now possibly can.
Well, yes, if you could do that, that'd be great, because this is how you do studies and do correlation of that. I would love to find out if crime and violence is down. So I would want to see if whether or not that has any bearing, or whether or not that's a consequence of the poverty being down, the economy getting better, unemployment being down, and so on. So that it's interesting to find that out. So while you guys crunch your numbers, let me go to the next island.
Oh, okay.
While you guys do that research for me, let me know what the figures are. What in terms of poverty?
I'm not seeing anything for 2024. I'm seeing an article that was published by the.
What about 23?
Right. So the article I found was published in August last year, August 18, 2023. It says the Planning Institute of Jamaica is projecting a fall in the poverty rate from 16.7%, to which it rose in 2021, representing a 5.7% point increase relative to 2019.
Wait, okay, that's 2021. No, I have updated figures which show that, because 2021 was like during the middle of the beginning of the pandemic, because in 2023, I think poverty went to about 21% in Jamaica. Poverty went up. So yes, it was predicted to fall, but it didn't fall because of COVID. And so poverty went from 16.7% in 2021, actually, into at least and to over 17%. And at one time it was at 21%. But I want to know, it'd be interesting to find out what it is now, post-COVID. But I know that unemployment is up, earnings are higher. You are telling me that Statin or the Planning Institute is projecting that poverty is projecting a reduction in poverty. So we know of the projections, but in terms of the actual figure, we do not have that. So it's interesting to find out. So maybe we can get that later on. But this is good. It's good to know that that's what in terms of crime and violence is. But as you said, some of the figures may not be correct because it's a local government election, and it is within their interest to provide a narrative that makes them look good. So now we have to find an independent study that is not sponsored by the political directorate or by the government, that truly shows what crime. But the thing is, I wanted to make the point, crime and violence is, in terms of the numbers, it's never stable. In 1 month we may see crime and violence, because a couple of months ago there was a sharp decline in crime and violence. But as soon as there was a sharp decline, within weeks there was a sharp rise. Okay, and that has always defined some Caribbean islands, especially, so for example, Trinidad or Jamaica, Guyana, Haiti. They may, even in terms, not just same thing with in terms of the economy or GDP growth. If GDP or if poverty, if the economic indicators, if there is positive today, okay, it's never lasting, it's never stable. So one of the things that has defined our economies, what has defined our socioeconomics, the political economy of the Caribbean, is that it's our the fluctuation, our fluctuations. We're never stable. Okay, we go from one extreme to the next. So it's difficult to to um to make certain predictions or to do certain planning and so on. And that is why many investors say that they're opposed to investing in certain places among certain people, because in those places it's difficult to plan, it's difficult to predict, and because of the instability. So what needs to happen then is not just to promote, not just to have these great numbers, but the thing is now, how do we keep these numbers stable if when they're good? Okay, Alisa, your hand was up.
Oh, I was just saying that I found an article, I guess, that was released on the same day as the one that the GIS posted, to say it was
Okay.
saying that, so while the GIS headline was that poverty is projected to go down, the RGR one was saying that poverty increased by 16.7%. So that would have been the post, I guess that would have been the post-COVID
Yes, but that
figure,
is yes.
which would have been the same August 18 last year. But I couldn't access any further details because my phone said that it's not protected, so I never bothered click on it.
Well, yes. So sometimes probably have to install a VPN or a VPS. I don't know. Sometimes they said they don't want you to go on a particular website, and so they give you a false reading of the website. Say, oh, it's a fake website. Say, for example, one of my websites, RenaldoCMcKenzie.com, it was flagging. Search engines were flagging it when people tried to go on it as, oh, critical alert! This website is stealing your information. That's a lie. That is an algorithm that people who are scrupulous, unscrupulous. Sorry, people who are competing, your competitors. They want to divert traffic away from your business, divert traffic away from your website. So they flood it with malware, spyware, or with false information, as okay, so that you don't go on that website, so that you don't promote that website, because they have something against that website. They don't want you to see that website. So they create critical errors. Somebody had brought that to my attention with one of my websites, and I had to reach out. I had to reach out to Google. I had to reach out to all the search engine and said, stop flagging my website. Okay, it is a legitimate website. Stop flagging my website. You are driving traffic away from my website. And to be honest, no, I'm talking to you about that. That is a legal matter. That is a lawsuit. Okay, that's legal action I can take against search engines that are flagging my website deliberately to drive business away from my business. Yes. So, anyways, I brought that up. So, because you may find that that's what they're trying to do. So investigate and see what's going on with this website, because it might be a legitimate website and they don't want you to go on that website to get the information that you need. Okay. So, all right, guys, we have 2 minutes. We talked about Barbados, did we? Yes. Guyana. What's the socio-political economy of Guyana? We stop here. Guyana's economy is based on agriculture, particularly sugar and rice. And at one time, and although one time I think we were exporting sugar to Guyana, because and a lot of Caribbean islands were struggling to meet international demand at one time as well. They were struggling to meet international demand on rice, and so they had to import. So a lot of islands would export, but then they'll turn around and import. I don't know what kind of policy that is, where they have to import all these products that they are already exporting, and because of an inability to meet their export quotas, they now have to import to meet that. Jamaica had that problem. Guyana had that problem once, which is something that government had to address, which stems from their lack of capital intensive technology, which that is something that they would have to now invest in, and they have to work together as Caribbean islands to invest in their countries so that they can maximize on the earnings that they will stand to gain if they were capital intensive. Okay, you can't, and I said to you, you can't just focus on the first stages of production. You have to develop your economy so that you can do the finish and you can do large scale things. By the way, so the socio-political economy of Guyana is that they're based on agriculture, particularly sugar and rice, mining, gold and bauxite, and recently oil production. Oil production. It faces challenges such as ethnic tensions and political instability. Before the end of this course, this semester, I'm going to read an article or share an article with you entitled Challenges to Caribbean Development, or Solutions to Caribbean Development. Is Guyana's oil the answer? Is Guyana's oil the answer? They find, okay, so now they have all these deposits of oil in Guyana. And many people are now rushing to Guyana to invest in into their oil production and so on. And I said, is this the answer? And I said, Guyana has had oil. They have had bauxite, sugar, rice, but they are among the poorest in the Caribbean. Okay? That has not helped the country. Same thing with Trinidad. Trinidad should have been doing much better. Same thing with Jamaica, the 1950s. We had bauxite. That's not helping us. Okay, we still have bauxite. It's not helping us. So that's one of the things you have to consider. The religion of Guyana. Guyana is religiously diverse, with Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam being the major religions alongside smaller communities practicing Afro-Caribbean religions. In terms of the demographics, the population is ethnically diverse, with significant Indo-Guyanese, Afro-Guyanese, and American populations. One of the things that we never talked about when I did Dominican Republic, and later on I'll talk about, I'm going to help, the beginning of next class, I'm going to have you watch a video, or if you go to my YouTube channel, and I added it as an external resource for you guys to read, to watch in Caribbean Thought Semester 2 2024, or Pan-African and Caribbean Thought. There's a video I just added, and it's at the bottom of the playlist, that talks about that continued the conversation looking at Caribbean peoples before the African peoples came, which is a little bit more telling than the one that I had shared with you guys the previous week. So I was going to share that with you guys today, but I don't have time. But you guys can watch it. It's quite interesting. And then I like to read comments. So when you look at the video, also read the comments. I stuck a comment, so added a comment there. But there's some other comments. Read the comments, because people from Guyana and all over the Caribbean talked about it. And one Guyanese man, that Dominican with DR man, said, "Oh, there's a large Taino people. The Taino people have remained in Dominican Republic. So in some parts of the Caribbean, there are traces and there's evidence of the American Indian population that existed even after slavery, and that continues today. In DR, they have that, but also in Guyana. In Guyana, the population is diverse, with significant Indian Guyanese people, African Guyanese people, and American Indian populations. The Taino people, so a lot of them were there. Some of the Taino people, so on and so forth. Where am I? Sorry about that. The current position is that of Guyana. Where am I? The socio-political economy. Sorry, the history. Where am I? I'm so sorry about that. Guyana. The history. Guyana gained independence from Britain in 1966, and Alyssa had asked me something about the assassination of Walter Rodney. If I had gotten into my lecture for today, which was supposed to be the second part, which is supposed to be looking at Garveyism, or the limitations of Garveyism and Black nationalism, and I had started talking about nationalism, but I wanted to quickly really look at delving into the Caribbean islands and then go back to nationalism. But I'm going to go back to nationalism because I want to talk about Guyana and Walter Rodney. But in the meantime, Guyana they gained independence from Britain in 1966. And we're going to talk about Barbados and how the other Caribbean islands had prevented Walter Rodney from coming there. But we will talk about that later on. But Guyana gained independence from Britain in 1966. It has a complex history. So Jamaica is one of the first among the West Indian islands to get independence. Okay, but Guyana had gained independence in 1966. It has a complex history of ethnic tensions. Ethnic, just like India, we said Trinidad had a complex history as well of ethnic tensions, not as pronounced as the one in Guyana, particularly between the Indo-Guyanese and Afro-Guyanese communities. That also helped to define Trinidad a little bit, okay, but more so in Guyana. Now, Walter Rodney is a prominent figure in Guyana's history, and Walter Rodney was a Guyanese historian, political activist, a scholar, and his most notable work was How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, examines the impact of European colonization, Now, there's more on Walter Rodney, but I don't want. And today we won't get into Walter Rodney. Okay, I think not next week, not the next class, but after the next class 9, we will talk about Walter Rodney and the struggle for Guyana's independence, and we'll also delve. And then I don't know if you can get me. Maybe I have a guest. I can if I want, but I have so many things I want to share. But I probably get somebody to talk about Haiti, and a guest to talk. And a guest to talk about Guyana. That's about it for class today, guys. Thank you so much. We will pick up next week. There is no class, so I want you guys to do an assignment, which I will send out in an email in lieu of us missing or skipping next week. So we will meet week after next. I will give you an assignment to conduct, which is simple and easy. You will ask some questions of 10 people in your community or in your churches or wherever, or of Caribbean diaspora. Ask them some questions. And I wrote it down. We're wrapping up now, actually, but this is the question you will ask. What was your attitude towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs? And you will, what is your attitude towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs? Positive, negative, both positive and negative, neutral, undecided. And then you will ask, what was it? Has it changed? Yes or no? Why has it changed? Why or why not? Why has it changed? Why has it not changed? And then we will say, and we will give them the option X, Y, Z, and then or other. They can say why it hasn't changed, and then and of course we will ask some demographics question in terms of their location, their education, their denomination, their culture, age, occupation, and that's it. Just a soft questionnaire for you guys to do, and then you guys can come to class and present your findings in terms of people's attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs in your locales or wherever you live, in your communities or whatever. You just give it out to just people in your family or friends, 10 people, just 10, including yourselves. And in fact, if you go to my YouTube channel, I think there is a questionnaire, a soft questionnaire on my YouTube channel that is available, or if you go to the podcast, Spotify, the community channel, or to my YouTube page, the community page, this same questionnaire is available, and you can participate in it for yourselves. But I'm going to prepare the questionnaire for you, send it out to you, and you can duplicate it and give it to people, to just 10 people, and tell me what your finding is. I'll have it available to you by the weekend, by Sunday, and then you can circulate it. All right. That's about it, guys. Thank you so much. When we come back, we will pick up from, we talk about Martinique, Cayman, Belize, Grenada, Puerto Rico, and then we'll start talking about, and then we will continue looking at the limitations of Black nationalism. We won't delve into Fidel Castro, Maurice Bishop, Edward Seaga, Basil Pandy, Jean Bertrand, Aristide. We won't look at them yet, okay, until we have exhausted these islands, and then go into the limitations of Garveyism and Black nationalism, making a comparison between between George Padmore's nationalism and Garvey nationalism. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy your holidays, and I pray that God will continue to keep you. Hopefully, maybe by the next time you come, I will have a major announcement that book 2 of neoliberalism is published. Okay. Take care and walk good. Any questions, by the way? Any questions? All right. So we wrap up here. Take care, guys. Walk good.
Thanks,
Oh,
sir.
and by the way, if this particular material is not available, let me know. If you don't have a copy of it, I think it's on the JTS Moodle website, but if not, let me know. I'll upload it to the website so you guys can have access to it. All right, well, take care. I will stop share the screen now and I'll end. Take care, guys. I can't find, actually, okay, I can't find it. Stop share. Take care, guys. Walk good.